Hi, and welcome to this very interesting and exciting opportunity to sit down and record a podcast regarding menopause. I'm here today with two of my really great colleagues, amazing humans, Louisa and Kerry. Welcome, both of you.
Thanks, Matt. It's good to be here talking all things menopause today.
Amazing. Louisa.
Hi, Matt. Thank you. It's so good to be here talking with Kerry and yourself. Yeah, lots to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to get cracking straight away because this is such an important subject, and we're linking this into Menopause Awareness Day, but also the ongoing and growing conversation of menopause. We're going to present or talk about our own personal perspectives of menopause. Doesn't mean necessarily we have, in-depth knowledge and experiences. So I'm not going to say that we know everything. Please don't think that we're coming at this as we're the experts. We know everything about menopause, because you know what? As we will see out there, there's a lot of conversations going on, and it's about just learning and educating and supporting each other through our own personal journeys. So what I'm going to do is just encourage all of us, and for me as well, for those men that might be listening to this episode, to talk openly about what we know and what we don't know, and how we can find out more and how we can get involved in more conversations to this wonderful subject that's really growing across society. So I'm not going to start with an introduction and my perspective, so I'm going to throw that over, if I can, to Kerry, if you want to start with your perspective to start with for this conversation.
Yeah, thank you, Matt. And I think that you made a pertinent point at the very beginning about gentlemen, guys, men not knowing about menopause.
Yeah.
And it's actually a myth that men don't need to know about menopause, because there's lots of men in the workplace as well and at home with families. So starting out, and also you could go even down the line a little bit further into education. I wonder how many of us, when we were growing up, knew that our mums was going through the menopause, and how did our fathers or brothers respond to it. So I think that starting pitch there, and the perspective of living with someone who is going through the menopause, or being a colleague of someone, is a really interesting thing to pose, and a good thing to pose. We are living and working with people. There's lots of women in the workplace today, and it's suggested that about 1 in 10 women who are working will leave the workplace because of the menopause, which is a shocking statistic, 1 in 10. And I just think that women in their 40s, women in their 50s, they're absolutely fabulous, but they can be top of the game, and menopause kicks in, and then they slope off into the shadows. And that's devastating for some women. Being a woman myself who's 50 and experiencing peri-menopause, it can be really debilitating at times. So that's the first thing I just want to bring to the attention, really, that I think knowing and understanding about menopause is a topic really for everybody at the moment. And we need men on board. We really need men on board holding our hand going through this. You may have known a pre-Kerry before who wasn't peri-Kerry, so to speak.
Right.
You may have known her before, who you could have had a bit of bants with, a bit of a joke with, but it completely shifts for women. And that's the kind of perspective I would like to share there today to start with. I mean, there's lots of perspectives we can really unpack here, but that in itself, it's learning about it. It really is. It's getting on board and learning about it in some way, shape or form.
Brilliant.
It can be really profound, and it can be tragic that, like I say, women are just slipping into the shadows, and they're at the top of their game in their career. And the other thing I just want to say before I hand over to Louisa, and then obviously, we'll probably come back to myself, is that, again, the shocking statistic that 8 out of 10 women say that their employer hasn't shared information. This, again, learning about it. So no information is shared about it to train the staff or to put into place a menopause policy. So for me, they're fundamental things, hence really getting on board with menopause over a year ago now, to encourage organisations, but also children alike, to have that awareness. I know, just briefly, that my daughter's noticed a shift in my mood, a shift in my behaviour, to the point of my daughter checking in going, "I've noticed, Mum." So yeah, I just think education, training for all, really, is the point, and the perspective, I think, is the starting point. What about you, Louisa?
Yeah, I think from what I've learned about it over the last few years, because before I'd obviously heard about it, I'd obviously knew some of the symptoms, but the symptoms were almost always brushed off in sort of a bit of a jokey way, especially that office banter, for example. Someone saying they're having hot flushes, for example, in the office, and then somebody making a comment, or you could be going through the menopause, or even women actually making jokes themselves about it, which I think it's in the past it's probably been something that people have laughed about because they probably haven't really understood it. But now I think as I learn about it, I don't want to fear that age, because I do have a little way off until I hit that point. Again, I could have go through menopause early, but it's trying not to have that fear around it, but to be educated enough to be prepared, to know what to expect, and actually know what to do to help make those symptoms better. And I guess my fear is that if companies don't get on board with it, and if the information isn't as accessible, that there could be quite a gap in how companies approach it, depending on how seriously companies take well-being and the ever-growing world of well-being as well, which again, menopause is very much sitting in that. And also just thinking about how can we prepare children as well, and young people, when they do see their parents maybe going through it, and actually trying to be supportive instead of kind of going, oh well, mum's changed, or this they're acting oddly. Actually, if we can be a bit more aware of maybe what our parents might be going through, then we can also encourage them that it does warrant them getting help as well, whether that's mental health support, whether it's speaking to their line managers about it, or even going to their GP. But there is that kind of fear around actually what can happen in that conversation when they have that with that GP, and whether it's going to be a successful conversation, where they're going to be signposted then to the right help. I've been, through research I've done more recently, it looks like it's a little bit of a postcode lottery at the moment about whether you are able to access, there's a bit of a shortage of HRT at the moment as well. So women who have been on it for a while and relying on it are worried about when they're next going to be able to get their prescription. And also I'm sure there's women out there who are worried they can't afford it, or they can't keep paying it. And what a huge amount of stress to have on somebody's shoulders, when actually it feels like it should be a fundamental right that women get this support like any other medication that you should be able to access. So it's just, I think for me it's just trying to hopefully help with that awareness side of it, and education, and spread that word so that actually women know what to do, and I can prepare myself, and spread that word to friends and family and people of my own age as well, to say, look, this is going to happen, we can't avoid it, it's a natural thing of being a woman, it's going to happen, but actually how can we try and stop that from being such a drop-off point for us, and actually to be able to encourage us to stay and work, to actually feel supported and reach out for that support just as much as people coming to us with that help do. Try not to be fearful of it, I think, and just kind of embrace it and just see what happens with it.
Yeah, I think women can get derailed literally in their relationships, in work, and like you said, bringing women back up to a point of being well and thriving again. Again, some of the research and statistics, particularly from the Fawcett Society, .org.uk, I find it quite interesting that almost half the women haven't approached the GP, and 3 in 10 have seen a delay in diagnosis, and 1 in 4 are being diagnosed with depression as well. So there's a misdiagnosis going on. So then I would, if somebody approached me, and I have had male members of staff from other organisations when we're doing our mental health first aid training, saying, Kerry, what do I say? Because again, guys don't want to be saying the wrong thing. They're expressing that to me. And I encourage, again, to perhaps keep mood journals, because the mood completely shifts and it's different to depression. I'm not clinically trained, just as a caveat there, but I have done a wealth of research myself to support myself to come through it. To be better supported and better understood, so I can communicate that with my family, with my daughters, and other members of family as well. So I think that misdiagnosis, as you rightly said there, that can cause stress. It's already derailing within itself, and then the financial burden. but we have seen it's been reduced quite significantly over the last, I think it was 4 months. So I noticed within, when I was going to the pharmacist to collect my HRT, I noticed the shift in how much it was costing. And it was just a fundamental thing when that happened, when it was released into the press, because then other pockets of society can access that support. Again, feel better, be well and thrive. And that's what we want. That is what we want.
Sure is. I think from my perspective, and I'm coming at this from a few different places, I guess. I've got daughters who, they're going to grow up, and they're my youngest is a teenager, my eldest is 20, and I've got a wife and my mum, and other people around me, females around me, very prominent figures in my life as well, and obviously my colleagues. So I can't hide away from the fact that I'm surrounded by females in the business who are just amazing humans who, you've talked about it, Kerry, you've talked about your own journey and experience. But for me, if I'm talking about it from a male's perspective, the first thing that stands out in my mind is the fact that my mum went through, well, I guess, menopause very early, because she had a hysterectomy at 29 years old. I was only 4 or 5 years old at the time. I'm 47 years old now, so I'm a little bit older, but I do quite vividly remember the changes that my mum went through at a very young age, and talking what you said, Louisa, about young, in the 30s, there are people who are in their early 30s who go through menopause too. And it really, it stood out, quite profoundly stood out to me when she was going through that. And I remember hearing this thing about HRT. I didn't really know what it was around those ages, but my mum's always been very open talking about things, and it was quite good, because she actually gave us, the words when we were young. So we sort of knew what a hysterectomy was, we knew what HRT was, we understood why she was having this hormone replacement therapy and what it was there for, and we could see when it was running out as well, which was for her, you could see the change and shift in her mood and in the way that she acted. So that was sort of my first ever steps into understanding this. I guess I didn't really have the language around it. I never had an education around it. We didn't sit down in a classroom and talk about it, but it was just from my mum's sort of sharing what she was going through. And the second one for me is through my wife, and having a wife, and we're all in this same sort of age group now of sort of the perimenopausal into the menopause age groups. When you look at the age range of sort of where it primarily sits within the sort of mid to late 40s into early 50s. And so, a lot of our friends in our community around us are all within that age group. And as my wife started to go through it, I could see, excuse me, I could see some of those things happening. She'd talk about it. We're very lucky. We got a relationship. We talk about these things. So it's never hidden as a shame or a bad thing. It's always talked about as a, understanding and raising awareness, which, that's what our role is here anyway, is to try and help to raise a bit of awareness. And I think for me, sending out a message to all the other men that might be listening, I really hope there are men who listen to this as well, is to say it's about talking and listening, most importantly, listening to what's going on, and trying to establish, okay, what we think is going on is probably not what's happening. We think we see it, we see a mood change, we think the person's being a bit moody or low, we see them forgetting things, and the brain just becomes a little bit more foggy and can't remember where I put my car keys. It's always a big one in our house, of course. And so it's important to recognize that these things are happening and changing, and they're not actually being controlled by anything apart from a chemical change or whatever it might be that's going on. So I'm not an expert in this, as you said, Kerry and Louisa, we're not experts, but you know what, we're people who want to raise awareness, and to do that we do research, to do that we share our journeys, our experiences, and to do that we hopefully encourage more people to talk about it. That's what this is, right? So that's, I guess, my perspective. I'm seeing it happening a lot around me with the ladies in my life and the people, friends in our community. And we just need to be open to it and understand it. It's not all just about, people with depression or whatever it might be. So I'm going to throw it out there, really, back to you both as well. Other thoughts, comments, because this is an open conversation more than a sort of a presentation. So anybody want to jump in, say some more from your perspective?
I think Davina McCall has started the ball rolling.
Yep.
And she's recently released a new book. I think it's called Menopausing, Davina McCall, The Positive Road to Your Second Spring. And I just can relate to it. Again, it's all relatable from a perspective of myself, my mum.
Yep.
And I think things like that can bring about what women can do for lifestyle changes as well. you know, whether that be HRT, mindfulness meditation. So for me, what comes in there with reading is the practical sides where we can, I feel, we can add value and support people on their journey, whether that be our local community or whether that be, you know, organisations that we are reaching out to or speaking to on LinkedIn. So it's the education bit, I think, all of the time, you know, getting people really involved and engaged, slowly but surely.
Okay.
You know, I think it's such a topic that's becoming more prevalent within the workplace, but there are calls for change. So again, what are we doing? Are we assessing what we're doing in the workplace or out of the work? You know, within the home life, Matt, you know, it's not, you know, there's men and women everywhere, coupled up or colleagues, whatever. So again, it's that education for me.
Brilliant. Yeah, I agree. I totally agree. I think that's where it's all heading towards, isn't it? But we're coming to this, and it reminds me so much of the work we do in mental health. You know, when we're talking about mental health as a specific subject, we're adults coming to mental health training often for the very first time. We're adults coming to a very first training about mental health. This is exactly the same thing. You know, I know we're going to touch on another subject at some point, which will be around neurodiversity, but we're learning about these subjects that we're hearing about in press and media. We're hearing about in the big wide world. We've seen them going on for years. We just haven't got an understanding of what they actually are. And it's so critical. Louisa, I'm just going to sort of come back to you then and say anything from your perspective there.
Yeah, I think as we know that link between our physical health and mental health is so sort of integrated, and as we sort of learn more about it, I'm sure there are going to be other things that we need to be aware of, and it can come across as being quite confusing for a lot of people, where they think, oh, there's another type of thing that we need to learn about, we need to be more considerate about. But instead of like overcomplicating it a lot, it's actually just going back to the basics of actually what, you know, yes, it's great to have menopause training in place. Yes, it's great to maybe look at having a menopause related policy in place at work. But, you know, where you can really start to make a difference is encouraging those conversations and allowing, you know, raising that awareness around it. And we were talking earlier about how there is a gap with education from even from a younger age, and actually it shouldn't just be something that you learn about later on in life. It should be something that you are prepared about from a younger age, because as we know, it can hit women at, you know, people at different times. But as the world changes as well, it's also trying to think about that language around how it's not just going to be, as we would you know, before, class women to, you know, just be going through menopause. You know, we need to be thinking about it in a way that actually, you know, people go through menopause as well. So it's just you know, it's a topic which might seem quite daunting to people, but I guess it's just going back to that thing of, you know, go back to basics, talking to each other about it, asking people. You know, probably for the first time last week, I actually asked my mum and said, you know, when did you go through the menopause? Because I don't really, it wasn't noticeable to me. And she just kept it so under wrap that that pressure for her to not allow her emotions and what was going on to be obvious. I mean, you know, I'm sure for a lot of families it's obvious, and it does, you know, it can have a serious impact on relationships. But I also felt sad that she maybe didn't feel like she could talk about it or be open about it. So those, you know, if everybody's a bit more aware of these things, then it just then goes back to being a bit more compassionate to each other, and to actually, you know, it might not be just menopause that someone's going through. There's lots of different things people could be going through, and actually treating people as individuals. And, you know, a lot of people always have stuff going on behind closed doors as well, and it's just being aware of that whole self that somebody is. You know, they're not just, you know, work Louisa, they're, you know, home Louisa, they have other elements to their lives, and obviously something so big like this can really change a lot of that. And I guess leading to that whole difference in trying to women, you know, who are going through it, then having to sort of have a new relationship with themselves, and actually kind of connect with it, maybe even a new identity that they have to then, you know, you were talking about, I know you made a bit of a joke there, Kerry, about being Kerry, but then it's also just, you know, trying to find who you are again, and who, you know, what makes you happy, and how can you manage these symptoms that you're experiencing. Yeah.
Amazing, but interesting perspectives as well. Again, and Kerry, do you want to come back on that Kerry piece that was mentioned by Louisa? I thought it was fascinating. You said it like that as well. It's
because I just noticed a shift in everything. My mood, the brain fog is the worst.
Yeah,
it really is. I'm lucky that my oldest daughter B is like a PA. And she's just that compassion that she has. My other daughter's a bit younger, really, Matt.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't expect my oldest daughter to support me through it at all. As you know, I'm a lone parent with two children, which is wonderful.
Yeah.
But having her here, because I'm not with a partner who I can go, I'm really struggling right now here. I need your help.
Yeah.
B does pick up and notice, and she will go, and we always go now, how's your day been today, Mom? How are you doing? And I feel I have to really take a few steps back, because I'm thinking there's a fine line here. You've got a lot going on as a teenager growing up. But occasionally I do go, it's been a bit difficult today with the brain fog, and there's something that we laugh at so much. And I was going to work the one day, and the MHFA lanyards.
Yep.
They had been to see Little Mix. So which one did we were in a rush. I was all over the place. The peri-menopause had kicked in full swing. And I picked up the Little Mix lanyard. We were sat in the car. The girls burst out laughing. I just felt like, what is going on?
Yeah.
And I went, excuse me, girls, I'm just going to go and change the lanyard. But it's something that we remember now.
Yeah.
I've stepped out the front door to go on a walk on a Saturday morning, and I've left the keys in the house.
Yeah.
And the girls know my routine on a Saturday morning to go for a walk with the breakfast club.
Yeah.
But I've had to knock the door and get them out of bed on teenagers. But all of that, I think it can fill you, or it's filled me with a little bit of shame and guilt, and where have I gone a little bit? Where am I? Who am I again? But I think it's coming into the understanding of myself that this is just a natural process of life, and it will rebalance itself. Your estrogen's all over the place, your progesterone, all of that. And it is about rebalancing. And it's a lot of patience, I think, from yourself, but also that care and compassion from each other, in and out of the workplace.
Yeah, so interesting. And I love there's a statement you made there very briefly, a natural process of life. And I think that's what we forget sometimes, isn't it? Is you can't go through life without going through it. The majority of females, but it's acknowledging and understanding when it's happening, and making sure people are aware of what's going on from around you. Fascinating. Wow. Where do we go with this conversation? Where does anybody else want to go? Any other comments? Either of you want to make on sort of your perspectives? What to do next?
I always think of it 3 S's, actually, Matt.
Okay.
It's serious.
Yep.
It's sensitive, but support each other.
Love that.
And I just think, just remember that, it's serious, but it's sensitive, but support each other, in the best possible way. And just get that education out there. Follow people like Davina McCall on Instagram. She talks about it a lot. She educates people a lot. There's your starting point. If you've never heard of it, or want to be a guy that wants to be on board and champion it, in your personal life or at work.
Brilliant. No, I love that. I think that's a really useful sort of way to frame it as well. Louisa, any thoughts from you?
I think it's just for anyone who isn't yet aware of any of all this information, it's to kind of be curious and do your research, and as and when you can get a chance to read articles. There's always stuff in the news about it, but then also asking those questions of how have you been through menopause, not to be shy away from these conversations, because if we make it such a taboo thing, it's never going to change, is it? It's like anything, we need to start kind of talking about, as you say, in a serious way, but asking people about it, and encouraging that chat and seeing what people say. And then I'm sure each of those little micro conversations that occur you're going to learn something from it. Because like talking about mental health, we need to be talking about a lot of things, and it it doesn't need to be embarrassing. It's not. It's, as Kerry said, it's a very natural thing. So if we can try and break that down a little bit by having those little conversations around it, then it's going to make a huge difference in time. Anything like this takes time to change, doesn't it?
And it's small steps, but small steps are better than no steps. And I think that's what we're trying to sort of promote, isn't it? So we, and I like that thought of being curious and asking questions. I'll tell you what's fascinating for me, right? From where I'm sat is listening to both of you talking. Your own perspectives shares something that I don't know and I don't understand, and now I do, in a different way. And it's so important. It's why I do, or why we do. I shouldn't say I, because it's all about us, isn't it? It's why we do what we do, because it enables people in a safe environment to talk about these things. The only way we can ever normalize them is by talking about them. If we ignore them and pretend they're not happening, we can never normalize conversations. So I think we have to really, and be serious and sensitive and supporting each other, but we need to normalize the conversations. The only way to ever do it is talk about it. And I think that's why this is really useful for us, if nothing else, for us to have these openness to these conversations, because what, I want to help and I want to support and I want to listen, and for Kerry, I want to be there for you, and Louisa, if you want to talk about the subjects, I want to be there with you as well, and that's what we have to all become, isn't it? It's sort of, it's a supportive community versus it's people preaching down one thing and everybody has to run to the rule. I think we all have to listen and learn from each other. So I just really appreciate doing this session, or having this session today with both of you as well. We are going to come to the end of this at some point, just to make sure that we sort of wrap it. So I will just say final thoughts from both of you, just any final little snippets you want to. You've shared some amazing thoughts already, but do you have any final things you just want to put in there? Who wants to go? Louisa, I'll come to you first.
Yeah, I mean, it's just what I said earlier about just you don't need to read full on 20-page articles on it. There's lots of accessible information on there, on social media, on BBC News, NHS website. It's just kind of as and when you get a moment, just have a little flick through, and each time you do it, you'll probably learn a few extra things that you didn't know. And also, again, talking to people about it, because you're hearing those lived experiences will help, I guess, for myself and other women maybe who haven't got to that age yet, to not fear it and to kind of lean into it and embrace it as being a natural part of being a female.
Brilliant. Appreciate that. Thanks, Louisa. Kerry?
I think for me, as a final thought, it's the call for change. Maybe that's very apt because women are going through this natural change process. But it's a call for change everywhere, within workplaces, schools. How they would filter it down to schools, I have no clue, because it's a lot for a young brain to process. But there is, for me, it's a call for change here, where we're educating people to bring them up to speed to have better conversations. That, again, and encouraging people to perhaps consider HRT to be well and thrive again, because, again, if you don't mind me saying from my own personal experience, the shift in how I felt after then trying HRT, which I was very apprehensive about, I felt completely different within 3 weeks. And Carol Vorderman said that as well.
Okay.
Recently.
Brilliant.
She said she'd always been a woman at the top of her game, and then she started to notice signs and symptoms of anxiety, and then she went into a deep depression with following that intrusive thoughts. Quite relatable what she said. For a lot of women, not just talking about myself there, for a lot of women I've heard it, and she said the same thing when she went to the doctors and started to explore more around HRT. It was a game changer for her. So again, another key message there is to explore what is available, and keep an open mind. Maybe.
Excellent. Well, great. Again, great insights, great thoughts, feedback, and everything else. And I think that's so true, isn't it? It's explore, be curious, learn, listen, and all the wonderful things that we promote all the time, really. And I think, for me, the final thought is, you know, to the men out there, to the ones who are supporting or they're around other females, or they're, you know, and also not just to men, but to anybody that's out there as an employer or as a manager or as a leader or whatever you determine your role in the organizations are, is to encourage you all to know more about this stuff, because the more that we know, it shouldn't be scary to know more, you know, at our end of our lives in terms of where we are and what we're trying to do. It should be encouraged, because then we can support each other better. And I just want to put that plea to everybody, you know, please take time to understand this. Don't just give it lip service and say, yeah, I get it, I know what it's about. Because if you do that approach, you're never going to really understand and be able to support properly. So that's a bit of a plea at the end there. We, you know, and I do want to say as well, calling it out on this, is Kerry took the lead in developing our version of menopause awareness training, and just really thankful for you, Kerry, for doing that, and you know, putting together something that is so amazing as well. So, you know, and that's something we want to promote and to support people through. So if anybody listening does want to get involved in learning more about menopause, don't know where to go, look at us, because we know what we're, you know, putting out there is something that hopefully will help people to learn more about this. So that's what it's all for. I shouldn't do the shameless marketing pitch at the end, but you know, this is a conversation for us all to help to raise awareness around. That's what we do. That's what we do at Simpila as well, is we try to help raise awareness, and we got different ways to do that. This is one of them. So brilliant stuff. Thank you both so much for participating in this session. We sort of called it at last minute. We didn't really prepare for it, but you know what? It's just sometimes that's the nicest way we can ever do this stuff. Wish you both well, and I will see you soon. Thanks very much for listening, everybody.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks, Louisa.
Thanks a lot. Take care now.